I want you to imagine yourself as a member of Sonic Team during the development of Sonic 06. Things have not been great, Shadow the Hedgehog was not received well, and Heroes before that had generally mixed review scores. These games were still selling well, but you know kids will still beg their parents to buy the new Sonic game and enjoy it regardless of its quality. But this time, you and your peers at Sonic Team really want to deliver a Sonic experience on the new next-gen systems that would return to the level of quality fans were expecting. But alas, things were very quickly about to take a turn for the worse, and what was supposed to be Sonic's biggest, most ambitious title for its 15th anniversary would end in tragedy. Before I talk about the game, I think it's important to highlight the conditions these developers had to go through while working on it. Sonic 06 is just a name us Sonic fans gave the game to distinguish it from the original Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis game since they share the same title. The reason for this was because the game was meant to be such a huge step forward for the Sonic franchise that Sonic Team wanted to use the name to signify that this was what Sonic is. The de facto definitive Sonic experience, if you will. However, an issue that Sega has plagued Sonic Team with since the beginning is about to reach its boiling point. I mentioned in my Sonic 2 video that despite how good that game turned out, Sega rushed Sonic Team to get that game out the door and later split Sonic 3 in half to meet a McDonald's sponsorship. This practice of rushing Sonic games out the door existed since the beginning and did not stop into the 2000s. Heroes was rushed for 03, Shadow was rushed for 05, and now Sega had eyes on that 2006 release date, so Sonic Team was in for another bout of crunch. But oh, does it get worse. Yuji Naka, the man who had been with Sonic since its conception and had been involved in every Sonic game pretty much up until this point, left Sega to form his own company and make original games. I can only imagine how such an occurrence would affect the team's morale, but guess what? It gets worse. Sometime during development, Sega received dev kits for the Wii, and when Sega said they wanted the new Sonic game on all next-gen systems, that meant the Wii too. Only problem was they found out how underpowered the Wii was and figured it wouldn't be able to handle a port of Sonic 06, or at least getting a port to work under the schedule they had, and the release date quickly approaching proved to be impossible. So what did Sega do? Surely they kept all hands on deck for this project and put actually finishing 06 as a priority, right? Nah. Sega just had to get Sonic on the Wii. They'd be missing out on money if they didn't. So Sega decided to split Sonic Team in half to have one team work on Wii 06 port that later turned into Sonic and the Secret Rings, while the other team was tasked with finishing their big new project with what's now a much smaller team. Development had to have been miserable during this time, so bad that near the end they were ignoring bug reports from Quality Assurance Division because they literally did not have time to fix the bugs. And the rest is history. The game came out and was so shockingly bad that it shook the gaming community at large. It was infamous. Nowadays, everyone knows about Sonic 06 and the state it was released in. It was all over the internet at one point. And here I am about to add on top of the pile with a perspective only people in my age range can add, and a detail that makes my experience a little more unique. Sonic 06 was my first mainline 3D Sonic game I had ever played as a kid. My first actual Sonic game was Sonic Genesis, the terrible GBA port of Sonic 1, but my second Sonic game was the aforementioned spin-off Sonic and the Secret Rings, but I didn't own that one, my cousin did. Sonic 06 was the first 3D Sonic game I saw at GameStop and asked my mom to buy for me. And that day I went home and played it religiously. Every day, every night. The main setting of the game Soliana I have countless memories of just wandering around listening to the music and vibing out with Sonic & Co. Like I said, a kid will go to the store, beg their parents for the Sonic game on the shelf, and enjoy it regardless of its quality. That was me. I truly grew up, I guess, on Sonic 06. Truly had time to sit with the game, and I think most importantly, I was able to experience Sonic 06 without the preconceived bias of what Sonic is. I had only touched 3 Sonic games, 2 of which from vastly different eras in this franchise, and had seen several others through fan members playing, say, Sonic Rush on a DS. To me, Sonic could look like this, or this, but it was still Sonic. I was and still am accepting of the different forms or iteration this character will take, or even tonal shifts from game to game if it's still enjoyable to me. I've been emphasizing in some of these videos that to me, if it's fun, it's fun. I'll just say that, even if what's making these games fun for me isn't something older or even newer fans jive with in this series. In 2024, after playing Sonic 06 again for the umpteenth time, this game is not good. I know that, you know that. I can go all day talking about glitches, the load times, the general bugginess of Sonic 06, but the game has positives to speak of that I will highlight in this video. Some of the ideas present in this game can definitely work, or at least could have been taken and improved upon in later entries, and I want to talk about all of it, starting with the plot. We're back to the story select setup not seen since Sonic Heroes. Only Sonic is selectable so far, so I guess I'll start with his story and dart around when needed. Sonic's story opens up in a new location that's hosting a celebration ceremony. This girl is then given a torch to light the lantern, but the torch causes her to have visions of the entire city engulfed in flames while a giant monster roars over the destruction. The girl comes back to her senses and we get her name, which is Elise, but soon after her prayer to the son of Soliana, Dr. Eggman attacks, interrupting the ceremony. Okay, what happened here? I'm not going to pretend that Eggman's design here bothers me, truthfully it doesn't, but I'm drawing attention to it because I also think it was not necessary to change him from his old design. This one simply looks worse. More threatening? Maybe, but the old Eggman design had its cartoony elements while still being able to be seen as threatening. This is just an attempt to make Eggman look more realistic to mixed results. But regardless, I'm not as bothered by it as some others might be. Regardless, he's after the Chaos Emerald Princess Elise has, and this thing she also supposedly has called the Flames of Disaster. Sonic then makes his debut here, looking and acting the same as ever. I love this cool moment where Sonic uses his foot to nudge this robot off the platform. However, something to note is when Elise sees Sonic, she has a vision of a white hedgehog surrounded by flames, speaking as if she's seen this hedgehog before. Sonic then grabs Elise and then speeds off, while that same white hedgehog watches him from atop a building, claiming to have finally found the Iblis trigger. As an opening cutscene to a Sonic game, this was pretty good. The intrigue and setup is there for something that could be really interesting. Sadly, almost immediately after this cutscene, everything takes a nosedive. Sonic and Elise escape, but Sonic encounters and quickly destroys some of Eggman's robots, which causes him to get distracted long enough for Eggman to capture her while he's off guard. The girl throws her emerald to Sonic and he watches the egg carrier fly off into the distance. For some reason, Sonic takes a nap and doesn't bother to chase after Elise until morning. I have no idea why this cutscene takes place at night, only for Sonic to start gathering information in the morning. This could have easily been fixed if the egg carrier flying to the distance happened while the sun was rising to kind of lead into the gameplay afterwards, but regardless, that's what happens. Sonic runs into Tails, who joins you in the search for the princess, and the two make their way through Wave Ocean, chasing after the egg carrier. This ends in the two missing the thing and having to return to the city, wasting time. But upon arrival, a girl is stuck on a roof, and the city guards won't let you go into the desert until you rescue her. So you do that, go through the desert through this mirror thing, which is how you get to the levels in these stories, and somehow Sonic and Tails are teleported directly to where Elise is being held captive. Well, actually, it's sort of shown that Sonic and Tails broke through this wall, but it's a blink and you miss a detail, and the sound effects to me sound more like Sonic breaking the sound barrier rather than breaking through a solid wall. Regardless, Eggman stops him and forces Sonic to fight the Egg Cerberus, in which after his defeat, Sonic and Elise escape to the desert and take some time to catch their breath. This is where Sonic and Elise share a moment, so to speak, and Elise tells Sonic about the Flames of Disaster and why she thinks Eggman is after her. So their sun god is named Solaris, but they believe that his rage will destroy the world and that his destruction comes in the form of the Flames of Disaster, and 10 years ago, the city almost was destroyed by the same force. After Elise shows concern for Eggman trying to cause the same event again, Sonic grabs her arm and starts running, trying to make her feel better, saying that nothing starts until she takes action, and if you have time to worry, then run. I can see how this moment could have been better, but I do like Sonic's way of telling Elise to confront her problems if they worry her. It's pretty neat, but upon getting back to the city, problems immediately arise when that mysterious hedgehog appears. This guy's name is Silver, and he's from the future trying to prevent a catastrophe from occurring that somehow involves Sonic. And after a very janky boss fight, Silver gets the upper hand on Sonic, who gets help from Amy as she allows him time to run off after Elise was kidnapped mid-fight. After getting this guard to stop wasting your time, you're finally allowed access to the new city, where you meet up with Tails and Knuckles to give you a card with an Eggman hologram telling Sonic if he wants the princess, he has to hand over his Chaos Emerald at White Acropolis, one of Eggman's bases way out in the snowy mountains. Sonic, despite having no plan and even having Tails warn him that it's probably a trap, decides to go anyway, and oh, would you look at that, it's a trap. Sonic handing over his emerald obviously causes Eggman to backstab him, which results in Eggman sending Team Sonic forward through time with this machine, resulting in them meeting up with Shadow and Rouge. Okay, detour time! At this point, like in Sonic Adventure, once you meet the main character of a story, you can then play as that character, so for this game, that will be Silver and Shadow. So in the final cutscenes in Shadow the Hedgehog, Shadow boldly proclaims that he's putting the past behind him, even saying goodbye to his old self while throwing away a picture of Maria and Gerald Robotnik. Well, we get to see the results of his new conviction. Shadow works for GUN now, the same organization whose soldier killed Maria all those years ago. Personally, I like this. Not only is the image of Shadow as a military official badass, but also shows how much he's grown as a character, willing to push past all that baggage and just protect the world like his friend asked for, and what's the best way he thought to do that than to join the military. During a mission, Shadow infiltrates Eggman's base to respond to an SOS signal that was transmitted by fellow Team Dark member Rouge the Bat. She seems to have gotten a hold of this scepter thing as a part of her mission that I'm sure will be of no importance. After a fight with a reskinned Egg Cerberus, the two teleport back to New Soliana, and Rouge requests that Shadow takes her to a rendezvous point. And he does, until all of a sudden Eggman appears and ambushes the duo. Rouge attempts to fly away with an oncoming missile but gets flanked by the Doctor, causing her to drop the scepter she was holding. The thing hits the ground and mysteriously causes all the robots to malfunction. In that same moment, the entity inside is released.
It's no use! Pull back! Pull back! Pull back!
What? His shadow.
Oh, how ironic fate can be. I would never have believed I would be resurrected through your shade. I thank you, Shadow the Hedgehog.
Who are you? And how do you know my name?
I'm Mephiles. Mephiles the Dark. What? Did you forget me? I owe much to you, Shadow. Oh, yes. What you gave to me, I now return to you. A one-way ticket to oblivion.
As far as villain introductions go, Mephiles is definitely up there for me. His creepy factor combined with how hard his lines are just does it for me. Points off for the models disappearing suddenly though when he teleports Shadow and Rouge to the future. Mephiles talks like he has prior history with Shadow, which is followed up on later, but he looks like Shadow because he literally took the form of Shadow's shadow. This is how Shadow and Rouge end up meeting with Team Sonic, and the two groups come up with a plan on how to escape back to their own time. They come up with a plan to use Chaos Control to cause a space-time rift and use it to go home, and they can't use only Shadow's Chaos Control, they'll need Sonic to do it as well, meaning they'll need to find two Chaos Emeralds. During the search, Shadow and Rouge stumble across the defunct Omega and try to repair him, but no dice. I like how Shadow gets bummed out a bit for not being able to repair his friend. It's one of those small but nice moments that show that Shadow cares about the members of Team Dark as friends, something this game does a really good job at showing, and I will touch on more a bit later. On Team Sonic's end, it has become very apparent that this is the ruined future that Silver Guy was saying Sonic somehow caused. Miraculously, the team just so happened to have been sent to the exact point in time to see Silver, Mephiles, and one other character I haven't mentioned yet, in the middle of being told that Sonic is the Iblis trigger, and getting sent back in time to kill Sonic. This, folks, is one of the first cutscenes in the beginning of Silver's campaign if you choose this episode after unlocking it post-Sonic vs. Silver boss battle. I'll go over Silver's events fairly quickly, but Silver was born in this world where Iblis was released, and he and his friend Blaze the Cat are in a constant struggle fighting Iblis, who appears every so often causing havoc in his wake. Sonic 06's story has a bunch of issues that I have with it that I decided to push off to after the synopsis, but this is an oddity that in of itself can be addressed now. Blaze the Cat being from the future in this game directly contradicts her being a princess from another dimension in Sonic Rush, a game that released the same day as Shadow the Hedgehog predating 06. I know I haven't reviewed Sonic Rush, so a lot of my friends probably don't even know who Blaze is, but that is a blatant continuity error that this game created. Now, I can fill in the blanks with my own fan theories linking these two games together all I want, but that doesn't change the fact that in-game there is barely anything stated or shown connecting the two games, so it just comes off as, in this one she's from the future, and in this one she's not. One day when I come back to this franchise, I'll talk about Sonic Rush, because that game is, oh, so good. But that would have to be after I covered the Sonic Advance trilogy, Sonic Battle, Knuckles Chaotic, Sonic Pinball Park. Anyway, Blaze informs Silver of Iblis' reappearance, and the two go beat him back into remission. Silver then questions how long this can continue and if there's a way to completely destroy Iblis, which is when the Mephiles shows up to show Silver a way he says will solve their Iblis problem. This leads to Mephiles showing Silver and Blaze into his room, where he explains to Silver he will send them to the past to change the current timeline by killing who he dubs the Iblis Trigger. He shows Silver who the guy is by showing him an image in the Chaos Emerald of Sonic in a burning background. I get that Silver was born and brought up in this hell and therefore be more prone to believe a random deep voice Hedgehog who's probably really good at Yu-Gi-Oh! Food for thought, But Silver should have at least asked a bit more questions. Hell, Blaze is more the type to ask for details, and she just stands there, repeating that the Hedgehog is indeed blue. After they leave, Team Sonic walks in, and before they can question too much of what they saw, Tails looks at the data Mephiles pulled up and relays to Sonic that Elise died aboard Eggman's battleship after it exploded. And this only occurred 2 days after the Festival of the Sun, which means if they don't return to their normal timeline soon, the princess will die, kickstarting the events causing this future. The two teams converge once more, and Tails reports that a signal for a Chaos Emerald is nearby, so everyone goes out to look for it and come across it, floating in the air. Would you look at that?
Don't touch it!
After that boring boss fight, the two Hedgehogs use their Chaos Emeralds to induce Chaos Control to go back in time, Team Sonic and Rouge going through while Shadow gets distracted by Mephiles and pursues him. This actually leads into a really cool scene for Shadow as Mephiles tries to manipulate him into joining his side by saying that when the world turned to ruin, the humans blamed him and turned on him despite Shadow protecting them. Shadow, in response to this, refuses to join Mephiles and boldly proclaims that he determines his own destiny, building off his arc in Shadow the Hedgehog in a really cool way. This causes a boss fight that's alright, but then Omega shows up. Before this, Rouge gave him a Chaos Emerald, a Chaos Emerald brought from the future, mind you, more on that later, and gave him the order to assist Shadow. This, I think, changes the timeline to where Omega is now operational and able to help Shadow in this fight against Mephiles, in which after he gets winded, I guess, and tries to flee, the two follow and now both are back in the present time somehow. Forgive me for jumping all over the place for this not-so-brief plot synopsis, but I like to focus on Silver for a bit. Silver and Blaze, after being sent through time, begin their search for Sonic. Silver actually found him and almost jumped in for the kill, that is, until...
Now I've got you, Sonic!
Hey!
It's about time I finally caught you again! Hey! You're not Sonic! I'm sorry.
Huh? Hey, where'd he go?
I still don't get how this happened not once but twice, but yeah, Amy causes Silver to miss his chance of killing Sonic, but Amy is a nice person, so she insists on helping Silver find what he's looking for. Unaware that they're looking for the same person, which comes to a boiling point in the Sonic vs. Silver fight, where like earlier, Silver gets the upper hand on Sonic and Amy steps in expressing confusion at Silver's attempt to kill Sonic. Silver does his best to explain his reasoning, but Amy isn't having any of it, boldly dropping this piece of information.
So I must!
No! I don't believe it. Even if that was true. If I had to choose between the world and Sonic, I would choose Sonic.
Those were definitely words she just said. Look, I get what she was trying to say here, as well as what I believe the devs' intentions were. I don't think the voice acting in this game is that bad, but some lines definitely needed redos, this one being one of them. Something about its delivery felt off to me, or maybe it's because the line is radiating more of that Sonic cheese than usual. Despite it all, I really like this scene and think it's really endearing that Amy put so much trust in Sonic like that. It moves Silver too, man had to take time to think about what happened. Thankfully, Blaze shows up to give guidance to this child since he's pondering if it's truly right to kill somebody to save the world. Her answer essentially boils down to, well, what other options do we have? And then the two decide to go to Eggman's base to see if they can learn more information, and after fighting the base's guard robot, the two find a Chaos Emerald. Afterwards, some frankly unimportant shit happens. Amy frees Elise goes home, Elise gets captured again, whatever. Eventually, Silver and Blaze have a conversation with Mephiles where Silver actually asks a question! But Mephiles essentially ham-wits the situation and tells Silver the guys at the train station it's now or never. The duo doesn't think this is sus in any way and just shakes their head while running off to the station. Shadow and future Omega link up with Rouge, and Shadow comes up with the idea to ask the doctor about Mephiles and get some intel on what he was plotting, leaving Rouge and Omega to keep track of Mephiles. Shadow asks the doctor his questions, and Eggman tries to manipulate Shadow into bringing Mephiles to him, to which in exchange he'll totally tell Shadow what he wants. Sonic leaves Tails and Knuckles behind after their time travel escapades, and he chases after Elise's train, I presume after reading about it in this newspaper. Okay, get this. Sonic saves Elise, right? Damn. Silver interrupts again, only this time Sonic is saved by Shadow, and the two Hedgehogs have a duel ending in probably one of the most replayed scenes in the Sonic series.
Chaos Control!
Never gets old. Anyways, the two Hedgehogs get into one final clash, resulting in them accidentally inducing Chaos Control, creating another time travel portal. Shadow tells Silver that Mephiles is manipulating him, and that if he wants the truth, to follow him through the portal where they go 10 years into the past to see the Solion disaster in person. Why this specific portal takes them there, how they know he's gonna go there, who knows. Maybe it's a thing where once you're inside the portal, you can just pick and choose wherever in time you want to go, and therefore Shadow just had the idea to go see what happened themselves. I know that anyone can throw money at an animation studio to make cutscenes for them, but the CGI cutscenes in this game look really good, especially for CGI in 2006. So, the Soliana disaster occurred due to these scientists, one of which is Elise's father, attempting to control Solaris. However, a meltdown occurs and the machine containing Solaris explodes, which splits Solaris into two beings, Iblis and Mephiles. They try to escape, but Silver tracks down Iblis while Shadow tracks down Mephiles, the dude giving Shadow the same sector Rouge had to allow Shadow to actually be able to steal Mephiles. Both entities get properly sealed, and since this is the past, it makes sense now why Mephiles was able to recognize Shadow earlier in the game. Silver just sort of stalls Iblis and then watches the Duke of Soliana seal Iblis inside his own daughter while telling her that if she cries, the seal holding Iblis will break, wreaking havoc on the world. The Duke kills over and dies, which makes me wonder how Elise responded to her father's passing at such a young age without even a tear. But regardless, Shadow leaves the scepter behind since he knows what happens to it in the future, and the two induce Chaos Control again to return, but before Silver hops in the portal, he leaves his Chaos Armor behind with the princess so she can keep it like a lucky charm, as Blaze told him to do when they first found it. And now we know why she had her blue emerald at the start of the game, which is pretty cool until you think about it for more than a few seconds, but we'll get there. Wow, that was a pretty lore heavy segment. I wonder what Sonic was up to during that.
Sonic!
Elise, you should go back to the castle.
Okay.
Princess Elise, ruler of Soliana. You've wasted so much of my time.
Sonic has spent this whole game chasing Elise, rescuing Elise, and losing Elise. The most interesting part of his story is when he's interacting with his friends, because other than that, it's just him doing the affirmation routine with a sprinkle of getting annoyingly interrupted by Silver. I suppose what's supposed to fill the gaps is the romance subplot, but again, saving that for later. I guess at this point, all that's left to talk about regarding Sonic's story is Sonic and Silver teaming up to save Elise. They fail.
Elise!
That's right, more time travel, woo! Sonic goes back in time before the egg carrier launches and pushes an all-out assault on Eggman's base, culminating in Sonic landing on Eggman's battleship right as it takes off. During the aircraft's malfunction, Sonic steps in to save Elise and defeats the Doctor one last time, and then makes a mad dash off the crumbling ship in a really cool CGI cutscene full of spectacle, ending in Sonic and Elise barely surviving and doing this winking thing with each other, concluding Sonic's story. Silver returned to his own timeline with Blaze, now armed with a plan on how to stop Iblis for good without having to change the past. The two charge forth with newfound determination and confront Iblis one last time in an honestly really cool and actually fun boss fight. After it, Silver attempts to recreate what the Duke did to his daughter and tries to steal Iblis into his soul, but it doesn't work. Blaze gives it a shot with her reasoning being she has pyrokinesis, so Iblis should accept her as a vessel, and it ends up working, but in order to truly save their world, Silver has to use Chaos Control to send Blaze with Iblis inside her to another dimension, which is visibly hard for Silver to do, as Blaze is Silver's closest and, well, only friend. It's a pretty heart-melting scene that was a joy to experience again. And Silver's story ends like that. Blaze is one of my favorite Sonic characters, and I wish she were in more 3D outings, and even though she doesn't talk that much in this game or has a focus on her like in Sonic Rush, I still really like her big sister relationship she kinda has going on with Silver. Make no mistake, while yeah, I don't like how they broke her backstory in this game to make her from the future instead of a princess from a different dimension, I still love seeing these two interact with each other, but as far as Blaze in 06 goes, that's it. She doesn't come back for the rest of the game, leaving Silver all alone. But I saved my personal favorite story finale for last. So when Shadow got back from sealing Mephiles in the past, like with Silver, this sparks an idea of how to handle him in the present. But first, they gotta make the Sector of Darkness again, since it, broke. For some reason, lighting these 4 candles by the statue spawns a fresh Scepter of Darkness for you to use, and now it's time to back up Omega, who is single-handedly holding off Mephiles in Wave Ocean. Before that though, there's this goofy line flub that they left in.
Agent Shadow, E123 Omega has engaged Mephiles. Head to the Wave Ocean, head to Wave Ocean immediately. Agent Shadow, E123 Omega has engaged Mephiles. Head to Wave Ocean immediately.
After fighting through hordes of enemies, Shadow and Rouge finally catch up with Omega after the dust settled, and Omega tells Shadow it turns out that the one who ends up defeating and sealing Shadow in the future is him, which clearly upsets Shadow to hear. But what makes this scene so great for me is what Rouge says in response to all this.
It's so unfair. Shadow's always here to defend the world. Despite that,
eventually, when something or someone is seen as too powerful, it is seen as a threat. And then the world becomes its enemy.
Shadow? Even if you believe everyone in the world will be against you, know that I'll always remain by your side. Remember that.
I will.
A real touching Team Dark moment for me, and also it's the Amy scene from earlier done way better. Moments like these in the earlier 3D Sonic games should serve as a reminder that Shadow is not just some edgy Sonic character or an angry Sonic. Shadow is a person who's been through a lot and grown through it all while finding friends who he clearly cares about, and it's something I miss about him. I try to refrain from talking about future games as much as I want to save my thoughts on them for videos, but the character art Shadow's been going through since Sonic Heroes is paid off in my opinion wonderfully in this game. There are snags. I mean, what element of Sonic doesn't have snags besides the music? But Shadow's character arc comes to an exciting conclusion with the final confrontation with Mephiles. After trekking through the desert and traversing through the temple, Team Dark comes face to face with Mephiles, who once again tries to manipulate Shadow to join his side to no avail. So another fight occurs and Team Dark pulls through, and Shadow attempts to steal Mephiles inside the scepter for the final time. But in a twist of events, the scepter actually explodes and Mephiles is free once more due to his increase in strength. He questions Shadow on why he has so much resolve to keep fighting for people he knows may turn on him in the future, and in response, Shadow has this to say.
If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have.
Shadow takes off his inhibitor rings, removing the restraints on his power, and defeats every Mephiles clone in the room, leaving nothing but a massive black puddle and 2 Chaos Armors on the floor, ending Shadow's story. Shadow's ending is perfect in a game with a story plagued with issues. It makes sense for his character to reject the forces trying to sway him in a different way again and to see him rise above that once more in this climax, ending what would have been at the time a 5-year ongoing arc for this character and his friends was truly fun to see again. We're not at the part yet where I present those issues I have with this story, as just like with SA1 and 2 and Heroes and Shadow before it, there's a last story to once again talk about, in which even though everyone's story had pretty satisfying conclusions, SA1's story also had satisfying ends while having an epic finale, and 06 is supposed to be like that game but bigger. So what does 06 do for the premise of his final hour?
Sonic! Sonic! Sonic? No! No!
Finally, the seal is broken. At long last, I'll be able to join with you. Iblis!
Okay, we need to talk about Mephiles. Mephiles from the beginning of Silver's story shows up to confront Silver about a way to prevent Iblis from ever being triggered, but if his grand plan involved eventually joining back up with Iblis to form Solaris, because yes, that's what happens, why didn't Mephiles just join with this Iblis right in front of him that appeared every afternoon? Why go through all these loops and hurdles and eventually killing Sonic the Hedgehog himself for the same result? He has some cool lines. I love his voice actor's vocal performance, and maybe him doing this has something to do with his name being Mephiles, which has the same prefix as Mephistopheles or the devil. In that sense, him causing harm and suffering and manipulating the cast makes sense, but headcanons I have can only take the character so far in a review. In game, it's not like any of these elements are present, which is a shame because they really wouldn't have to even change much about Mephiles to make him, and moreover Sonic's death worked extremely well and have more impact besides shock value. Imagine, for a second, if from the beginning Mephiles is portrayed the same way, but the game shows hints of him simply taking pleasure in the suffering he's causing the cast. Yeah, he has the goal of reuniting with Iblis, but on the way to doing that, he's relishing every second of conflict and strife caused by his influence. Mephiles never interacts with Sonic once before this point, but maybe showing him express disdain for Sonic's carefree attitude and desire to help folks in need, which would obviously put him at odds with the Hedgehog in terms of ideology, and then through the other stories he begins to understand that this Sonic guy means a lot to this world, so when Silver switches up and decides to help him, this would kill his enjoyment since Silver is no longer being manipulated by him, which would then naturally culminate in him killing Sonic himself to not only get directly what he wants, but in the process cause the whole world to suffer a great loss before an even greater one is to come by his hand, which would have had a way greater impact since it would have tied directly into the themes of the story and Mephiles as a villain better. Mephiles could have been one of the best villains ever in the whole series, which makes me wonder, had this game been actually finished, how different Mephiles would have been from what we got in the final product. Regardless, after he combines with Iblis, Solaris is formed, and he attempts to completely wipe every timeline from existence, but thanks to the plot, a little pocket space is formed due to the instability of time, and the characters all appear here. Everyone's reaction to Sonic's death aren't all equal in terms of how much I like them. A few line deliveries feel forced, while other characters in the background give the exact reaction I expect, like Shadow. But Eggman informs us that Solaris exists in the past, present, and future simultaneously, and defeating it here wouldn't do anything, which inspires Silver to want to accomplish just that, but they kinda can't as Sonic's dead, and accomplishing a feat with only Shadow and Silver would be unlikely. That's when Elise feels Sonic's presence in the wind and deduces that he's still alive, which is wonderful news, but pointless unless his soul is actually back in his body. Which Silver comes up with the idea to use the Chaos Emeralds to call Sonic back to life with the help of the princess. The gang does just that and gather around as the princess speaks to the emeralds.
So many things. Now it is my time to return the favor. I care not what happens to me, but please heed my voice. Sonic, come back. To me. To us.
This cutscene has been memed to hell and back and is hands down one of, if not the most infamous thing that came out of this game. And I'm not about to just call it dumb and move on from it. I waited until this scene to address another element of 06's story, and that's the romance between Sonic and Elise. For starters, I don't think it's weird for Sonic and Elise to have this romance plot in the first place, at least not weird for the reasons you might think. A lot of people point out that Sonic is a hedgehog and Elise is a human, but personally I never saw this any different than Roger and Jessica Rabbit in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, despite it being ages since I've seen this movie. Sonic's world may have a different art style and tone to that movie, but Sonic and Elise being different species is the same thing and isn't a problem. And if you want a more modern example of interspecies relationship in media, one of my favorite shows is Regular Show. And there's an episode where it's shown Margaret's dad is just a normal dude who had a whole family with another anthro bird. Granted, that's not the weirdest thing in Regular Show, but you get my point. To me, what makes Sonic and Elise weird is what reasons does Sonic the Hedgehog have to like Elise on that level? The guy who's always on his feet, free as the wind, always ducking his biggest fangirl who also has feelings for him and definitely can better keep up with them than Elise could. Sonic and Elise's relationship lacks chemistry. What do the two have in common? I don't know, something that makes Sonic look at her with this goofy ass face in one cutscene. There's never any point where you're rooting for them to get together, and it to me usually boils down to Elise falling for Sonic, I guess because he saved her from capture a bunch of times. Don't get me wrong, the two have moments together and some of them have pretty solid messages like the one I mentioned way earlier about Sonic telling Elise to take action against their issues, but this scene and the one after you rescue her again after the second Silver encounter usually just has them sharing a, at most, sweet moment that's usually sweet because based on what we know about Elise, she's had it rough and she sees Sonic as an escape from all that. Which, honestly, if the game didn't have a romance plot at all, it would have made this even more endearing, but because I know that's what the intention was, it just doesn't feel right for me for Sonic and Elise of all people to be a thing. Based on everything that has happened in the games prior and how Sonic himself acted, it's hard to imagine him of all people slowing down and taking a liking to this girl. If for some reason Sega ever attempted to give Sonic a legitimate love interest with a new character or even a pre-established one, I'm not even against the idea, it's just about the execution. I don't care for shipping, but I've been around the cesspool that can be Sonic Twitter and have seen many shipping related discourse, but through it all, I know that with the right setup, romance in Sonic can work if it makes sense, but this does not. The kissing scene also could have worked and also could have been an impactful moment in the franchise. But hey, it awakens Super Sonic though, who shares his powers with Shadow and Silver, who go up into the sky and beat Solaris, and that's when Sonic and Elise are sent to the room where Solaris sits as nothing but a flame, and Elise states that if they blow it out, Solaris would never exist, meaning Ibis wouldn't exist, nor would Mephiles. But Sonic and Elise would have never met, which upsets her enough to hesitate to blow out the flame despite all that's happened if it means she can stay with Sonic. But thankfully, Sonic wanted this cutscene to end just as much as I did while watching it, so he tells her to just smile and she blows it out, officially erasing Sonic 06 events from canon and resetting the universe to the beginning of the game during the Festival of the Sun, where Sonic watches along taking in the sights and in the end, perching on a building enjoying the rest of his evening. God, that was a lot! Yes, I felt the need to go over 06's story like this because I wanted to show that even though there are plenty of things wrong with this game's story with the plot holes, inconsistencies, and things that introduced to the series that thankfully never happen again, like Emerald time travel. Seriously, this concept was handled so poorly in this game. Characters using emeralds from the future to travel to the present day while still holding on to the emeralds and then using them later. Whole characters like Omega traveling to the present from the future, so now there's 2 Omegas, more emerald swapping later with Sonic and Silver. It's so bad with the rules of this concept because they never got to flesh it out to make it make more sense. Despite all that, there were genuine moments, concepts, and themes in here that are genuinely pretty good and deserve acknowledgement. Obviously the bad greatly outweighs the good, but the good here can honestly be in the conversation for some of the best moments in the Sonic series in my opinion, and this game is unfinished. And not at all at its full potential, not due to Sonic Team not giving a fuck and rushing out a product, but due to corporate greed at Sega enticing them to breathe down their necks and force them to rush for the holidays deadline, while taking half of their workforce away. And in these conditions, Sonic 06 was born. So now, over a half an hour into this video, what is the actual video game of Sonic 06 like? Broken. This game's first impressions are good if you only count the opening cutscene. Counting the actual game, good lord, it's not good. The first thing that you'll no doubt notice is how long this game takes to load everything. I played this game on my Xbox 360, downloaded to the hard drive, and that definitely made them better, but they're still far too long and can be an extreme pace breaker. Though, to me, this is still very much in the tolerable range because I played the PS2 version of this game, which has way longer load times than the 360. Once you finally load it in, you can move around the hub world and talk to NPCs scattered around. NPCs with yellow exclamation points typically have just flavor text for their dialogue, while the orange exclamations indicate that talking to them will point you in the direction you need to go. Honestly, if you're ever lost, the orange NPCs from the few times I used them had actually useful information telling you where to go or what to do next, so 06 gets points in that regard. However, Sonic, or better to say everyone, just feels weird to play around with compared to prior games. They have this unnatural lack of weight that takes some adjusting to, which feels like the result of a lack of polish. Some characters have it worse than others like Amy and Silver, who are slow as fuck and gain literally no speed. The ground control can be overly tight, which can be nice in open stages, but the moment the platforming is precise and not on big platforms, the controls can make it hard than it needs to be to do precision platforming, which wasn't much of an issue in previous games. That probably being because the last 2 games had controls that were too loose, and somehow we went from that to them being too tight. This series, man. On top of these control issues, every character in the air feels not only the need to automatically push forward after jumping off a spring, but then proceed to fall like a rock, which further complicates platforming. You experience all of these issues in the first 10 minutes of booting up the game because to reach the first stage in Sonic's campaign, Wave Ocean, you need to load in, talk to Tails, load again, talk to this guy to get the town mission, load into the mission text box, it only has 1 line of text, load the actual mission, experience this ring mission that demonstrates this game's control issues, load out of that, finally buy the Lightspeed Dash from the shop to dash across this trail of rings, and then you can do the first level. Wouldn't even be that bad of an opening if this were any other game that's not this unoptimized and this buggy. Also, you don't even get the option to save throughout any of this, so if you die in Wave Ocean, you have to watch the opening cutscene again, talk to Tails again, do the mission again, buy the Lightspeed Dash again, and then try the stage again. This is the only time they require you to play a town mission, period. It's probably just to show that they exist, but I'm sorry, the process of loading into these is so annoying that I didn't even do any other missions besides the one with Sonic, and I know this isn't the worst one. I've seen how bad the other missions in this game can get. Completing them just earns you more rings to spend at the shop, but the stages give you more than enough rings. You can get all your upgrades in no time at all. To go back to Wave Ocean, I'd say this level is a reimagining of Emerald Coast. It starts on a beach, has orcas everywhere, and even has a recreation of the bridge set piece from the same stage. The level design actually is really good. There's multiple pathways leading to different areas entirely at points, and there's usually a reward or two for looking off the beaten path. In fact, to jump ahead, I think the level design in 06 is genuinely pretty good, which is probably one of the reasons I kept coming back to 06. The levels have what I'm looking for out of Sonic level design. The problem is that there's usually something broken that drags down the experience. Whether it be slowdown, glitches, level mechanics not working properly or being too intrusive, or even the character abilities themselves. The characters themselves can control anywhere from passable to awful, but their actual abilities can also range from passable to straight awful. Even something as basic as Sonic's homing attack is now worse in 06 because you can't even spam it. Every time you hit an enemy with an homing attack, you awkwardly bounce off of it, pause for a full second, and then the game allows you to homing attack again, and it feels super clunky. You can still speed up combat as Sonic using the bounce bracelet. This absolutely melts health bars, so I recommend using that so you won't waste too much time fighting enemies in this game if you plan to play it. The slide move they added is also pretty good for taking out enemies, but for anything else, it's not. Like, I'm only talking about these abilities in terms of how effective they are at taking out enemies. On their own, the bounce bracelet is not nearly as good as it was in SA2, the slide move is not giving the rocket cell a run for its money at all, and the spin dash, good god, the spin dash. I never use it at all. And that's because you have to wait and charge it up for a certain amount before you can actually launch it. Why? And you can't jump out of it either, which means you can't even spin dash jump in this game. Hell, Shadow doesn't even have a spin dash in this game, even though he did in SA2. Tails can fly like in prior games, but it's trash because it doesn't control very well, and when you run out of stamina, you drop like a rock instead of gliding down slowly like you did in the classics, or even in SA1. He also has these dummy ring bombs that do nothing but lag the game, and the first person camera they give you by holding X is not that helpful because there's no reticle. The thing that's supposed to help you aim does a better job at disorienting me. Sonic and Tails are the first characters you will play as, and while their kits don't ruin their levels, their kits are still hella neutered. But to be honest, the first half of Wave Ocean doesn't have many things in the level that drag down the experience. Until you reach the second part, where the game's new playstyle comes in, that being the super speed sections. But I prefer the fan dub Mach speed section because that sounds cooler. In these, Sonic decides to kick his speed into high gear and typically chase after something important. This, on paper, is a great idea because it would allow you to feel the speed of Sonic while showcasing the power of the new hardware. But in execution here, it's awful! Sonic controls way too sensitive here and can't alter his direction after you make a jump, meaning whenever you decide to hop over something big or small, you have to hard commit to it and line up for it. Failure to do so will result in Sonic smacking into a wall or even clip his foot wrong on a piece of terrain and he'll start stumbling, which combined with the camera having the potential to freak out while this happens, leads to the controls becoming even worse and resulting in death. This is typically where most people die in 06 when first starting, and then they realize they never saved and groan at the thought of playing the first 20 minutes of this game again. And that's just Wave Ocean's way of dragging down the experience. Dusty Desert isn't too bad, but levels like these involving Sonic carrying Elise throughout the stage usually aren't too bad to begin with. Now that I brought it up, this playstyle is pretty neat. Sonic can do all his normal abilities except the spin dash, but he gains the ability to summon this shield to walk over quicksand and later water. That's the coolest thing about it, because as an actual shield, it's abysmal. I'm guessing the intent was for you to be able to smash into enemies at a breakneck pace and get score bonuses, but the hitbox on the shield is so bad that you end up taking damage trying that shit at high speeds, so it's typically worthless for combat. Dusty Desert has a few instances where they try to encourage you to do this, but trust me, it's best if you don't even try. White Acropolis starts off horrible with this snowboard section that instead of using physics to make the board slide down, you have to physically press up on the analog stick to make Sonic move, which at certain angles can be awkward because they want you to move around and get item boxes and grind on rails, but doing so can cause you to get stuck and once again cause the camera to bug out. After that though, White Acropolis is a fine level. The stage after Crisis City is a contender for the best stage in the game, but even it starts with a board section, only this one forces you to do those awful ramp jumps they put in the game. In previous Sonic games, if you were on a board, you automatically gained speed and could hold up to gain even more speed, and when you hit a ramp, all you had to do was tap the jump button. Here, you have to hold down A to build pressure, then jump at the edge of the ramp, but it's so buggy and awkward that it feels horrible. Another Sonic game came out the same year this one did called Sonic Riders, and that game had a similar mechanic where you can build pressure before jumping off a ramp to go higher. I don't know if they were going for something like that, but either way, one is a stylish racing game with more immediate benefit to jumping that high, and that's to do badass tricks and then attempt to land those tricks to keep the air meter filled. 06 is a platformer with different goals, so to change it to be more like the racer, I'd assume, is very odd, especially when there's no trick system in this game like in Riders, nor do you even get a badass trick for timing the buttons right. You just get this lame ass super hop. But yeah, Crisis City is the better stage post-board. However, following it is Flame Core, which has its own bullshit like the constant falling fire from this volcano in the background. It's so fucking obnoxious when it could have been cool as fuck. Imagine running through a Volcano Sonic stage, but the game actually tells you where the rocks are gonna fall, but it's quick, so you have to quickly guide your character out of the way. That sounds fun. But these rocks, I swear to God, are random. You can just be mid-spring or ramp launch and catch a stray from these rocks and possibly die for it, which is aggravating. Once you're in the volcano though, level isn't that bad. Knuckles gets his first playable segment here, and his controls are absolutely horrid. The hitbox on Knuckles' punch attacks are pathetic and will never hit anything, and his drill move, I mean, look at it here compared to SA2, that should speak for itself. But the one basic thing that makes Knuckles and Rouge, mind you, the worst to play as, is because they can glide and climb walls, but the two have a hard fucking time getting off the wall. This happens almost every time you snap to a wall. Sometimes I can break free, sometimes I can't, and have to spam the jump button until I do. Either way, this should not be in the game. Radical Train isn't too bad, there's some clunky scale physics you gotta contend with, but nothing horrible. Mach B section will hold the same amount of frustrations, except now, there's a required jump! Yippee! I love being forced to fight with the controls mid-gameplay, it's so fun. Tropical Jungle with Sonic and Elise is genuinely okay. The only issue I have with it is that there's this one part where they encourage you to smash into these robots with your shield, but I don't, for previously stated reasons. Tropical Jungle with Silver and Rouge though is a completely different level that is completely filler in my mind, due to the fact that both of these characters can fly, granted one better than the other, so oftentimes I just ignore everything and reap the huge time bonus and get the S rank. Yes, ranks are back now, but they go up to S, which will become a series staple. Technically, the max rank being S was introduced in Sonic Rush, but this was the first console game to do it. Same stipulations as before, good rings, good time, and a good score bonus will net you the S rank, but what rank you get determines how many rings should be paid at the end of the stage, which can be further used for buying upgrades, which as I previously mentioned, can be done in no time at all. Rouge and Silver's Tropical Jungle are such short stages that the time bonus and maybe a few enemy kills are all you need to get the S. After that, it's Kingdom Valley, which is a really awesome concept for a stage. Running through these ancient church buildings and roads and smashing through stained glass in the rain is really fun. Even with the Silver section and all the jank that comes with it, it's over fairly quickly, so yeah, I really like the level. There is a Mach Speed section at the end, and it does involve jumping and fighting against the controls, but it's relatively straightforward as long as you slow down. Like with any game, if you play it for long enough, you can play around the jank. It's just that this game is filled with more jank than the other Sonic games. Aquatic Base is the final level to talk about, and it's okay. I like the magnets, you can turn them on and instantly kill enemies, as well as the announcer lady over the intercom. A few annoying gimmicks here or there, but nothing terrible. The other characters do have unique portions in their levels, but mostly their version of the level is very similar to Sonic's or completely different in Tropical Jungle's case. Hell, there's an indoor portion of Dusty Desert where it's an abandoned temple and it looks really cool, but only the Shadow version of this level is actually any good. Shadow in general in this game is way more focused on combat, as he zips around the level punching and kicking and breaking robots apart, but the abilities they gave to Shadow to make it more interesting don't work very well, so it just seems like Shadow button mashing with no nuance to it. His abilities when bought allow Shadow use of the meter in the bottom right, which when it's full, you can enter Shadow's Chaos Boost state at level 1, lets you use Chaos Snap, which clunkily lets you zip between enemies to quickly wipe them out. I say clunkily because sometimes the shit doesn't work, and you just flash and fall. Level 2 just allows Shadow's normal Chaos Spears to do damage, which in my opinion they should just do that normally, but whatever I guess. It's really satisfying to do either way, smiting robots and monsters with a ball of electricity is pretty rad. Level 3, however, is embarrassing. This is supposed to be Chaos Blast. This shit ain't even a screen nuke anymore, it's more like a screen firecracker that got left in the rain. Overall, Shadow is still enjoyable to play as for me, but like the others, his kit, even though they added moves, feels neutered. I actually didn't mention this in the script, I actually just forgot to talk about it. But Sonic later gets access to the gems, which do a plethora of different things. You have to actually buy these in the shop, and they're pretty expensive. And also, broken! Each and every one of these gem abilities are all busted in some way. Because Sonic's meter in the bottom right never runs out. It's bugged. It's supposed to deplete upon use of these things, but that never happens, so you can use them infinitely. There's 7 of these things, and the green gem allows you to use its tornado move that defeats surrounding enemies, and it's okay, I guess, at doing that. The red gem slows down time, including the timer, but you can still go at a normal pace, so essentially you just get a free time bonus and easy S ranks with Sonic. The blue gem gives you an instant burst of speed at a moment's notice that will take you to your top speed, but it's practically useless because every time Sonic hits a wall with any semblance of speed in this game, he falls over. On top of the controls already being really tight and sensitive on the ground, at high speeds it's even worse, so yeah, you run into a lot of shit. The white gem allows Sonic to use the homing smash ability, which I think does more damage, but I'm not sure. I just know that the only difference I can tell is that Sonic does an actual trick animation when he does this. And this is the most broken one of all, the sky gem. It does this? Yeah, it tethers Sonic's body to the gem you throw and automatically pulls him towards wherever it landed at. It's really fun to fuck around with, and I can already tell the speedrunning potential for it is insane, but I barely use it. Cause 9 times out of 10 I end up dying when I use this shit. Going from the most interesting one to the least interesting, the yellow gem. It's a thunder shield that doesn't even protect you from damage, so it fails at being a shield. You have to equip these gems in the bottom right by like cycling through them, so like, you can only use one at a time, so why would you use this one? The purple gem though, I can totally see why someone would use this shit. So this one shrinks you down and allows you to run faster and jump as many times as you can. But because the bar never runs out, you essentially have an infinite jump. Marvelous. Anyway, back to the script. Omega, my god, he suffers from the same problems Knuckles does, where his attacks have terrible hitboxes, so it feels like you just can't hit shit. The only guaranteed attack that will hit is this pea shooter that does abysmal damage, typically skipping enemies when I have to play as Omega. The only thing I haven't mentioned with Rouge is that she uses bombs now, which by default in this game is worse than her quick and effective kicks in SA2. Still better than Knuckles' options, I can at least consistently hit shit with her, but it's so slow! While I'm at it, Silver is very slow, and has to throw objects at enemies using his telekinetic powers, which, while it's really cool he has these in this game, it's pretty janky, like everything else. And sometimes if you pick up something explosive, it can rub against other items you have carried and blow up in your face. The only speed up tool you get is this pathetic little dash that barely gets you anywhere, and for combat you get this psychic smash that stuns nearby enemies, allowing you to pick them up, and I literally have no clue why this ability isn't in his base moveset, it's so useful. They leave you instead with this psychic pimp slap that, like other physical moves in this game, has a terrible hitbox, and more often than not you get hit rather than the enemy. I hate that this is Silver's first impression on people because he's genuinely one of my favorite Sonic characters, but his debut was extremely poor. And the less I mention the physics-based ball puzzle in a game with broken physics, the better. I always skip it by clipping through the door anyways. Amy you play as like twice in Silver's campaign, and she's horrible. Bad hitboxes on attacks, a really random and also useless ability to turn invisible, and a double jump that kills all your momentum when you use it, so what's the point? So glad she's only played as twice, and the second time ain't even in a stage, it's a required mini enemy rush. Blaze the Cat is the final character to talk about, and she's probably the best character to play as. For starters, she has a spammable homing attack, which puts her at the top of the character tier list in this game, and that's not to mention her fire tornado move on the ground and the ability to do this useful double jump. But that's all the characters and stages. The only thing left for someone to do is to attempt to get all the silver medals in every hub world and stage, but fuck that. You can also get all the gold medals by getting all the S ranks on normal and hard mode of the stage, which doesn't feel too different from the original to me, but again, fuck that. You can try your hand at the multiplayer, which I remember being really fun. Can't show it though because no second player over here. Sonic 06 is littered with problems, a bunch of which I didn't even go over in this video because if I went over every issue or glitch 06 had, we'd be here forever. But to be honest, I think that worse games than 06 come out all the time nowadays. What made 06 so shocking, I think, is a mixture of two things. One, it's because back then we had just entered the 7th generation of consoles, and during this time, the previous era, the PS2, what you got when you bought the game was what you got. There was no patches or updates for bug fixes and just patch it later. So they had a more incentive to finish their games, or at least push them out at an acceptable quality. And two, Sonic was still considered a gaming giant at the time. Sonic dropping a game was the same thing as whenever a legacy IP nowadays with a good track record dropped a game. It was a reason to get excited, and there was trust in Sega back then to deliver. 06 had released in such a poor state that it wasn't just unprecedented for Sonic, but unprecedented at the time for gaming as a whole, especially from such a popular IP like Sonic. I'm not saying there weren't bad games before Sonic 06, no there definitely were, like E.T. for the Atari, but times had changed since then. That was a stock market crash. At that point, bad games like that will be considered shovelware on the PS2. Video games as a medium had reached a level of quality that people came to expect. I mean shit, I just said a term that people made up that means a low quality game that's typically made for a quick buck. There was a noticeable difference between games like those and popular IPs like Mario and Sonic. These games had expectations from fans that people wanted delivered. At the time, there was once a known level of quality to both of these things that people expected Sega to put out. Yeah, Heroes that came out 3 years prior and was considered mixed, as well as being the first multi-platform Sonic game, and Shadow was considered their first true miss, but Sonic still had that expectation. Sega still had that expectation that they put out great games. So to put out something as shitty as Sonic 06 cemented the fact for some people that Sonic was just not as good as it used to be. Along with it being in general around that time uncommon for an IP that big from a company that big to drop a game this shit. Sonic 06 has left such a damaging mark on the Sonic series, it's still talked about and referenced by gaming outlets that mention new Sonic games coming out as a point of reference, when 06 is almost 18 years old at this point. It's still heralded as this gaming boogeyman with no redeeming qualities, and I believe that to be untrue. There's good character moments here, capping off 5 years of story, some really cool animated cutscenes, and if you squint your eyes just a bit, you can see glimpses of the game they were trying to make but couldn't due to corporate Sega getting in the way. Sonic 06's failure changed the series' direction going forward. For years, they would run from this game, only acknowledging it by making fun of it, and outsiders looking in would make fun of the ideas here when they weren't even bad ideas. Sonic's friends were pretty much shelved gameplay-wise going forward because Sega felt that it was obviously Sonic's friends' fault that they were clipping through the floor or written in a way that may have made a few people cringe. Instead of keeping these ideas and expanding on them to make them work, to make something great, they threw it all away and instead chose to appeal to people who don't even understand the appeal of Sonic themselves. Sonic 06 and its ideas and themes present are not something for Sonic Team to be ashamed of. Sonic 06 is something corporate Sega should be ashamed of, for treating their team so badly and crunching them for holiday deadlines year after year, which in turn gave Sonic the reputation he arguably still has today. A lot of people and critics, due to the last few years of Sonic, began to think that Sonic just doesn't work in 3D, period. A lot of people saw how slow and clunky Silver was with his psychic powers, or how bad Amy had been perceived in 3D so far, despite me liking her in Adventure 1, as well as the many other broken or neutered characters featured in this game that further fueled the conversation. What sucks more so was that if you were like me and really liked all these aspects of Sonic others hated and were happy to see go, it really sucks. Some people genuinely believe that Sonic should just be about him rolling around in Green Hill, saying that he wants to go fast, and that Eggman should just be the only human in a world where even in the first game there were cities. They don't want all the extra stuff for Sonic's world to be fleshed out, even though they were fleshing it out even back in those Genesis games. And that's fine if that's your opinion and you truly believe that, provided that you are also respectful of other people, but Sonic fans have a track record of not doing that. I personally don't get it, but it's not for me to get. As long as they're not bothering other people and making them feel bad for liking something, then it's okay. I can go on, but it pretty much boils down to being respectful of other people's opinions, even if you don't agree. I understand the problems with those 6 more than ever now. I'm older, so obviously I can see that. But some people forget that Sonic's main appeal that they were going for was that he was supposed to be cool. He was cool to kids in the 90s, and going into the 2000s, I say Sonic still had that coolness, but in a different way. When I was a kid watching Sonic do all this cool shit and go on this huge adventure spanning a cast of characters I really like, doing cool shit like picking up stuff with their minds, running on the side of waterfalls, or beating the shit out of robots, it was cool, while also telling a story that felt like it had something to say or a genuine story it was trying to tell you. And the game, as stated earlier, even now, you can sort of see the skeleton of what could have been, which is why I'm really happy that a remake of Sonic 06 already exists. This is Project 06, or Sonic P06, a ground-up remake of Sonic 06 made in Unity, mostly by one fellow Sonic fan by the name of Chaos X. And I'm just gonna say it, Project 06 is my favorite Sonic game. Or at least it's top 2. The level design is practically untouched outside of minor differences changed to enhance the gameplay experience, but every character in the game has received major reworks to make them more in line with how they played in the adventure games, and this is the best Sonic has felt in a 3D space to me. Character abilities, game mechanics, and whole-ass unused mid-level dialogue was restored, as well as adding in-engine cutscenes at the start of stages to further connect the story together. Story cutscenes and bosses aren't in yet, but currently every main stage from Sonic, Shadow, and Silver's campaign are fully playable, and folks, what Chaos X and his growing team accomplished here is nothing short of inspiring. They pretty much got the bulk of 06 on PC, but with enhanced graphics, and everything looks so good! They added better lighting, differences in the time of day or weather to distinguish between two characters going through the same stage. The water and effects look great, with plenty of options to tweak what you want. Even being able to change the character's jump ball to look more like how they did in Sonic Adventure 1, 2, or even just the regular retail 06. I'd pretty much be reviewing a whole other game talking about P06 in this review, but for now, I'll just say this. P06 fixed every major and minor problem I had with 06's gameplay while adding new additions and abilities that feel in line with what these characters would do, and genuinely feel like love and care was put into every part of this game. Obviously, the working conditions of Chaos X doing this in his spare time is way different than being crunched under deadlines from Sega, but Sega can achieve results like these and greater if they treated their employees properly and allowed them to properly cook. I mean, just look at Silver, a character people thought would never work, but look at him. He's one of the most fun characters to play as in this game. And on top of this, the secrets they added, like being able to transform into Super Sonic, taking off Shadow's inhibitor rings, or even giving Silver the ability to go into a ball to bounce off enemies? Enemy bouncing is back! I didn't even mention that! You literally can't do that in Retail 06. You'll take damage if you try to just jump into an enemy. I could literally go on and on about why P06 is amazing, but this review is long enough, and besides, P06 is free to download. It's a fan game, and Sega is really lax on Sonic fan games as long as they aren't trying to turn a profit. But that's all for me today. I really hope you enjoyed this video, as it's my biggest video to date and probably won't be topped for some time. If you're at the end, consider subbing, love yourself and others, and have a great day or evening. Peace.